Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to assessment. Now, this is one of those topics where there's a whole lot of verbiage, there's a whole lot of vocabulary that teachers use and ideas surrounding assessment in education. But let's just really break it down and let's make it pretty simple. First things first, we normally associate assessment with tests. Now, here's the thing. Every test is an assessment, but not every assessment is a test. Let me give you an example of what I mean. If I feel ill and I go to the doctor, they draw blood and they're looking for a bacterial infection of some sort. So maybe they do a throat swab and they're looking for bacterial strep. With that, they're going to take that, they're going to put it in a petri dish, they're going to grow it, and they're looking for one of two options. Has bacterial infection, does not have bacterial infection. The way they determine that is they look at the growth and they say, yep, we have cultures growing, or no, we don't have cultures growing. Now, sometimes they might even attach a number to it, and they may say, oh, there's this many or that many. They assign some sort of number value to it, but the reality is you're testing yes or no. And so that's one type of test. But let's talk about a different type of test or assessment that you would use in a doctor's office that has a very different use scenario. If I go for a standard checkup, they're going to put a little clip on my finger, and that little clip with a little light in it is called a pulse oximeter. What it's doing is it's measuring the percentage of oxygen in my blood. Now, technically it's measuring the expected percentage of oxygen in my blood. But what you're looking for is when I sit down, if they clip that on my finger and I come up with a number between 90 and 100, they're happy with me and we're probably done with that part. If, on the other hand, they clip it on and they come up with a number that's in the low 80s or the high 70s, they're not as happy with that, and we're going to start looking for other symptoms. They're going to start squeezing the ends of my fingers and the ends of my toes. And so they're going to do something based on that result. Now, alternatively, if they clip that on my finger, in another type of situation, maybe that reads above 100%. In that case, likewise, there's something that they need to do, some steps they need to take. It's not so much, is there oxygen in the blood or is there not? Because the reality is there has to be oxygen in the blood. What they're looking for is what level of oxygen is there in the blood. In particular, is that oxygen level at the expected or normal level? Is that oxygen level below expected or normal level that requires one type of intervention? And in that sense, it's a medical intervention. They're going to do something. They're going to provide oxygen. They're going to look for obstructed airway. They're going to look for a number of other things. On the other hand, if that oxygen level is too high, well, if I'm in a hospital situation and I'm in a high oxygen environment or being given supplemental oxygen, they're going to turn that down because too high is unhealthy, just like too low is unhealthy. Our goal is to keep it in an acceptable or expected range. So when you're looking at assessment, you can look at a yes-no style assessment, or you can look at a progress monitoring style of assessment. And in fact, that's the interesting thing about it. We would call this a strep test, whereas we would call this an oximeter monitor or an oxygen monitoring system. Because what they're going to do is they're going to take repeated measurements, or they're going to track those measurements if it's outside the normal range. Now, let's take that medical example and let's apply it to education. Because the reality of education is we're going to be on some sort of spectrum. And we've talked about previously moving that student from the student to specialist. And to move a student from over here to that specialist level is going to require regular monitoring. Now, there will be times throughout the course of this process where we're going to need a yes or no test. Have the students mastered the content? Have they mastered the subject? But much more often, we're going to need that progress monitoring to see, is that student on the right path? Are they in the right area or the right range to be making progress? Let's move this into the classroom. If I have a student in biology class and we're doing a large chapter, we're doing a large section on the human genome, okay? And we're talking about all sorts of genes, we're talking about all sorts of scientific stuff. The first thing I'm going to need to know is, does that student have a grasp on the vocabulary? Now, they can't really learn much else about that topic until they have the vocabulary down and can understand and communicate about that topic using the correct words. So I'm going to monitor how much of that vocabulary do they know. Can they use it to this level? Because my goal is to continually crank it up and add more vocabulary and add more topic until we can get to this far side where we can say, yes, definitively this student does or does not have sufficient grasp of the vocabulary, sufficient grasp of the topic, and can communicate it based on the goals that we've set for the course. So there's two types of assessment. This monitoring type of assessment would be considered formative. And let's use that word. Let's talk about that word just a second. It literally has the word form in it. Okay, so we're forming this general understanding. We're building it, we're molding it, we're moving it along, versus a summative assessment, which is, again, let's look what's in the word. It's a summary, it's a summation. It happens at the end. So we have two ideas for assessment. We have formative and we have summative. Formative is growth-oriented. Our goal is, where are you right now, to help us determine where do you need to go. Summative, on the other hand, it's going to be determining, does this student qualify? Yes or no. Have they reached an acceptable level of learning? Yes or no, before moving on to some other style of topic, some other large jump in the goals that we've set for them.